Hey, hello, and welcome to the Feel Strong Fitness Podcast. My name is Justin McClintock, and today we have Allie Gerber on the podcast. We are digging into some of the biggest hurdles and opportunities that small business owners face, from fitness to finance. The fitness industry isn't easy. If you are a small business owner trying to build something lasting, authenticity and smart money management can be your biggest allies. Today, we are talking about how branding your business with purpose can set you apart, why building strong client relationships is a must, and how understanding your expenses can keep your cash flow on track. Allie Gerber shares her expertise on the financial side of things. Think tax pitfalls, common accounting mistakes, and why a personalized approach can really boost client loyalty. We also dive into the importance of clear communication and staying organized. That can make all the difference when tax season comes around. If you are a business owner looking to avoid financial missteps and create a brand that reflects your values, this episode is absolutely packed with insights to help get you there. Allie Gerber is on the Feel Strong podcast. Allie Gerber, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for having me. One of my favorite clients, as you know.
You say that to everyone's podcast that you guest on.
That's true. Well, this is the first one, so you're the only so far.
Is this really your first podcast?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, given how absurd I am and the stuff I post online and all the different information I give and kind of how I present it, and the fact that my hashtag is breast in the business, that there would be more people clamoring. But a lot of times if I get asked to speak, it's usually either to grad students about how their income is taxable at the behest of other grad students who are already clients. I'm usually on panels for how small businesses can, work through the challenges of just being self-employed in the garbage fire that is today.
And that's some of what I wanted to talk about. Full disclosure and opening up at the very beginning, you are my accountant. We're working together for years now. I don't even remember.
I think you came to me in 2019. You just randomly kind of bounced in and bounded in one day, and you were like, I'm Justin and I need accounting help.
Yeah, that sounds like a Labrador with, flannel, just like, can someone help? I'm really scared. Started a company. I don't know what to do.
I got to work with you and your wife, and it's been great ever since. I will say 9.8 times out of 10, you listen to my advice, so we're able to navigate things very good. That 0.2 times can be a little, but we're getting better.
I was going to say, I heard that. I was like, I'm getting yelled at later on for something. I don't know what.
Not yelled. Sternly reminded is what I like to call it.
It's extremely fair, frankly. I've earned at least that. This has been a long time coming because, frankly, I find you extremely impressive in a number of fronts that I'm hoping to cover today. Professional accounting part, which you're extremely good at. And I found you through other tiny, very kind of niche small businesses who were shouting from the rooftops. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Allie really helped me. And that's why I came bounding in. It was like, I sort of thought like I didn't even rate hiring an accountant with my little tiny business. This seems like it might be, a place who will at least listen to me. You're also appear to be, as far as I can tell, the actual mayor of Philadelphia. You're an amazing people connector. And the people you've connected me with also all say this. I believe you recommended my brand strategist, you recommended my financial planner, you recommended my business insurance agent, and I'm probably forgetting people. And all of those people say, isn't Allie amazing? She just seems to know everybody.
It comes with years and years and a philosophy my grandfather, who is the reason that I'm an accountant, kind of taught me that. I saw him from a very early age be there for clients in this very specific way. We called him Badass Bobby G, and that was like, he very much lived up to that name. My Zadie, my grandfather, was an incredible human in terms of how he supported clients. And he said to me very early on, it may feel like we are the accountants on the island of misfit toys, but that just goes to show you that everyone deserves good accounting advice and service. And this was before people didn't give bar owners, good service, tattoo artists in general, people who were sometimes on the fringe and they were kind of left floundering. And my grandfather really was like, no, this is one, not only untapped market and potential for clients, but also it makes everything better, especially Philly. He loved Philadelphia, born and raised there. What makes Philadelphia so cool, I think, is that there are so many small businesses and they really do make up this kind of cool business landscape, but it can be hard to find good advice, especially now with all of the misinformation that comes on TikTok and Instagram and things like that, because anyone can get on and say, I know about this topic, and people go, oh, well, they sound like they know what they're doing, and I don't. No one taught me about taxes, so they kind of take it as gospel, and it's definitely not. So
first of all, remarkable outlook on accounting. We've never talked about this before. That's basically my outlook on fitness, right? Like, I'm not looking for people who want to get on a bodybuilding stage or who want to lose 20 pounds in 15 days or any of that stuff. It's a little bit of a niche. It usually is a little bit more work. It's harder. But it's also very satisfying and drives, or hopefully drives, this kind of positive social change where now you're creating these people who have more confidence and they can be successful. And especially with those small businesses, they're not spending huge amounts of time trying to do something that, frankly, they're not any good at and just getting themselves in trouble.
I mean, my husband goes to you 3 times a week to train. And a lot of it was because I had asked you, Jeff had chemo about 2 years ago. And then after he finished, rounds and rounds of that, there's muscle waste. And then we got some funky blood work back. And his oncologist has been hammering into him. And he's like, oh, I'll get to it. Oh, I'll figure it out. And I just remember saying, it's already so overwhelming. And I was like, I'm just going to text Justin and see. And I was like, do you train people who have muscle waste from chemo and need help? And you're like, I sure do. And so I basically lovingly threatened him that he must do that because we weren't sure if he was going to have prophylactic chemo or like they were kind of throwing out all this stuff. And luckily none of that happened. He's very healthy, but he got his best oncology report that he's had ever. And she was so surprised. And she was like, a lot of it actually has to do with the fact that you were taking such good care of your body and you're working out. It helps with inflammation reduction after chemo and just like your body's response. So she was like beyond thrilled. She couldn't have been happier.
No surprise to you, he doesn't tell me that stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, he's a man of few words, mostly because I am a woman of a lot of words. So he just lets me have all of them. But I will say he does do a good job. He wears my t-shirts everywhere and people are never sure if I'm a real person and they'll kind of tap him and be like, but where'd you get that shirt? And he's like, oh, this is my wife's company. They're like, she's real? Because it literally has a pinup version of me on the back saying, I'll whip your books into shape. And so people are unsure, but then they read and it's got all my stuff on it. So he's a very good walking advertisement.
He is. And since you mentioned that, we were going to get to this anyway, but let's talk about your branding, because not only do you work with lots of small businesses and lots of niche businesses and people who may be doing kind of non-traditional forms of income in a bunch of different ways, but you're this super sexy accountant. It's everywhere. It's on the tote bags. It's on the website. As you said, the tagline is the breast in the business. I suspect, having already heard these words, a bunch of people have started to follow you. They'll see your tax tips, giving very serious, very useful, very tactical stuff in, if I may say, a pretty low-cut shirt looking lovely. And this is combined and really, really purposeful. And it feels extremely authentic, and it also feels special in a way that I think a lot of small business owners in general are scared to do. I see coaches all the time who are like, I want to be professional, and that means sterile.
Yes. So I don't know that the way that I brand and present myself would necessarily work for just anyone. So my first tax season was in 2002. My grandfather had always been a mainstay parental figure in my life. And from a very early age, my mother was a teenage mom and he just stepped in and he would take me for weekends. So I knew a lot of his clients, like walking in that first day, because he would pick me up and take me to them. And he had a client for everything, which is kind of how we operate my modus operandi of, well, I know someone for that. And that was something that clients would come to him a lot for. And I saw over the years. And then I became legally emancipated in 2002. And although it was an emergency situation, I went to live with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt is also in accounting too. And she's Bob's daughter. And, we kind of joke that you got conscripted into the family business. And so at the tail end of the 2002 tax year for 2002 tax season for 2001, Bob was like, you got to come in. And so I came in and I was like, I'm going to do all this stuff on the computer. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, but Bob basically humbled me very quick and in a hurry. He literally gave me a dusty old accounting book, the prior month's bank rec, ledger paper, and the current month's bank statement, and a pencil, and pointed me to an adding machine and said, okay, figure it out. And I remember I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, aren't I going to be doing like entering things online? He's like, you're not allowed to touch a client's books until you can prove to me you understand that when you make a journal entry or an entry, you understand what it does. Took me 3 days to figure it out. He was like, you can come ask me questions, but I won't tell you how to do it. And that was very much the way that my grandfather always worked. He goes, I know that you're smart enough to figure it out. I did that. And it was pretty interesting because when I, from the time I was 16, I've been in this business. And then it's how I put myself through college. I thought I was going to be an attorney until my pre-law professor very astutely was like, you are going to be miserable. I don't know why you're not doing accounting. And I remember calling my grandfather and basically like breaking down and being like, I don't know what to do with my life. And he was like, just be an accountant. And we were yelling at each other, which is something that was a very Gerber trait. That's how we kind of came up with our best solutions to things. And he was like, Allie, you're already doing this. Just stick with it. Figure out what you want to do. And so I always worked for him and with him in some capacity. And then I wound up moving down to DC. I was doing accounting down there. I did everything from government accounting. I worked for the Washington Post doing accounting for their online cars.com when that was like a big thing. And then I went to do cost accounting for a infusion and cancer center. I met these two amazing doctors until I got the call that my grandfather came down with something called Guillain-Barré. And we didn't know it at the time, but we didn't know how bad it was going to get. And so I came up, I took off like 2 weeks to try and before he got intubated, he was like telling me all the stuff that needed to happen. And then things got bad and, literally wrote down on a board, and with his eyes like on one of those boards where it has all the letters, he said, I need you to come up. So Jeff and I were newly married. We'd only been married for like a little over a year and a half at that point. And we talked about it. And I came up to Philadelphia first. And I'd been here since 2013 and Jeff followed in 2014. And when Bob got better, I still stayed on. I was still working and learning. And as I tried to pull away again to try and figure out what I wanted to do, he got sick. And so I kind of stepped back in and he passed in 2018, unfortunately. And then I bought my book of business from his estate and I bought about like 130 clients. And now we do over, this year, I think we're set to, by the time I finish the fiscal year ends and a couple nonprofits, I think we'll have like 905 returns completed, which is pretty big. I think the reason that I'm able to present so authentically is because I'm very confident in who I am as a person. And I didn't see any other accountant doing what I do or how I present. I figured people like me for me, so I might as well just be myself. And as I got more comfortable in my body and as I got into my 30s, and now that I'm on the tail end of my 30s, I'm kind of like unapologetically like, it's totally okay if I'm not the person for you. But a lot of times people walk into my office and say, oh my gosh, you're not some old guy who's going to yell at me for doing something wrong. You're going to explain to me and then probably yell at me a little bit if I still do it wrong anyway, but you'll lovingly help me get back on track, which is a lot of what I do. So a lot of that journey helped me realize that I could really be authentic, and the clients who there's enough business for everyone. That's something that Bob always said. And I really take that to heart. And if I'm not the person for you, I have some really great colleagues that I will refer out to, and some that will refer to me because they're like, this person is going to be with you. And it's not your typical person. Sometimes like I just got a bakery as a client, and she's super lovely and she's figuring it out. And her mother-in-law was doing stuff, and they're kind of trying to grow and separate that out, which I understand working with family is rough. That was referred to me by a big firm who I trade business with, because sometimes I'll get people who are too big, or I know if they walked into my office and saw the art and kind of the way it was, they wouldn't feel comfortable. And while I very much appreciate the referral, I always want to make sure someone lands where they are supposed to. When you come to me, I'm either going to be the person for you or I'm not, and I will help get you to where you need to be.
That's so smart. And people who listen, a lot of this will sound familiar because we do the same thing. Like, we only want to work with people who are a great fit, and we love referring people out to other coaches, institutions, gyms, all that, because you should be in the right place, and combined with the recognition that people are hiring you for you, right? There's a million accountants, there's a million coaches, there's a bunch of online software stuff. Like, people could kind of get it done. They want that feeling of actually being heard and listened to. They want that feeling of connection. They want that feeling of, yeah, I'm going to send my accountant a DM at 11 p.m. and no, she's not going to answer right now, but within 24 hours, I'm going to get an answer to this that I'm thinking about and stressing about right now. That doesn't work at H&R, I suspect. And they don't, my few experiences with other accountants was, I was very rushed. I got no answers to my questions. And looking back, I was like, I'm not sure that was legal. I'm not sure what they did.
A lot of it too is that people come to me and their initial thing is, I want to pay as little taxes as possible. So I start out the conversation now kind of a lot more, not forceful, but a lot more direct with, my job is to make sure that you understand every expense that is allowable. And expenses are predicated on the type of business you transact, like 99.9% of the time, not what type of entity you are, whether you're a sole proprietor or an LLC or a partnership or a S Corp or a C Corp. It's based on what you're doing. And so there's a rhyme and reason to it. And you know this from being self employed, it feels like, and I own a business, it feels like every part of my life is about my business, but that's not the way that the IRS feels. So when I tell people that there are certain things that they cannot expense, or people love to use the term write off, and that's actually like my biggest pet peeve, because when you are writing off an account, that is not the same as a tax write off. But in any case, I understand that need to, oh my gosh, taxes are so crazy. Everything is so expensive. But sometimes people don't like to hear that I am not going to pull out anything if I know that I can't defend it against the hardest and worst auditor I've ever been up against. He was an ex-NYPD officer, and he actually backed me in the corner, and I'm pretty he tried to hit me. Someone had to stand in between us. He was very aggressive. He was really upset that my grandfather wasn't there, even though he was intubated in the hospital, and he wouldn't push it off. But if I can get the argument about why something is allowable because it's in a gray area, I will do it. But if it is black and white, which a lot of things are in terms of expenses, I will tell people that. And they'll go, well, so-and-so was able to do it. And I simply say, I totally understand that. We can stop working together now per our contract, because I have a client services agreement everyone signs now. And that started a couple years ago, and people started skipping out on bills and kind of not really respecting the rules of a professional and client relationship. And here's what you're going to pay. And I'll happily send you everything back and delete you from the system. But if you are not willing to take my advice, I cannot make you take it, but I can control the type of work I put out there, which I think is pretty similar. I mean, we've had this conversation a million times before. It's a pretty similar outlook.
Yeah. And being able to stand behind it. And, 3 years later, when someone's like, hey, why'd you do this? You should have a really good answer. And if you don't have a good answer, then maybe we shouldn't go down that road in the first place. To take a left turn, because I reached out to Instagram for questions. Probably the number one question is, hey, I'm a coach. I'm a one-person business. I'm a solopreneur. What exactly, I'm going to use the right terminology here, what is an expense for me? Is gym equipment an expense? Is software subscriptions an expense? Are electronics an expense? Like what can I quote unquote write off? Because they're trying to do the right thing.
So I can give general advice, but because I don't know their specific information, I can't give the exact, So 9 times out of 10, the equipment that you are buying, that you are using for clients and, kind of propelling your business and doing more for, is absolutely expensible. Now, how it's expensible, either by way of depreciation, if it meets a certain threshold, or being able just to straight line expense it, taking it all up at once versus, taking it over a certain number of years. Dues and subscription, that's a big one, right? Because you might have certain software subscriptions that make it so you can coach your clients, either talk to them or build them a workout routine. That's absolutely allowable. When you're traveling to and from clients, because I have some coaches who go specifically from client to client's house and they train them. They bring their own equipment, they train. And so then we get into, okay, what was the mileage? What was the and then I have people who bring big things. I have a Pilates person who they bring a transportable reformer with them to clients' houses, and they have a specific van just for it, and it's branded and everything. So in that case, we're able to kind of do a little more. The thing where it gets wonky is that when we have to really look at, is this benefiting you personally, or can you use it for the business? We can always usually use a piece of something, especially when you use it in terms of business. But for instance, we've had this talk. You buy a ton of fitness wear, but you also work out a good amount. So how do you make it so the fitness wear that you are wearing when you are training clients, how does that become expensible? Well, the IRS is when you're using it for branding purposes. And so you put your logo on there, you put your business name on there. That makes things, one step easier for me to justify if I need to in any case. So a lot of it is, are you using it for business? And in that regard, is it something where maybe you're doing one type of coaching, but you want to expand your services and therefore expand your business? And so you are going to try different things and kind of research and kind of develop new programs, that all can be usable too. We just have to make sure there is not a personal gain from it. And if so, is there any piece that we can put in? So a lot of times there's not a simple answer, but my goal with clients is, and sometimes they're like, well, why can't you just tell me yes or no? And so we have to go down this kind of like pathway of, I want to make sure that I've documented the absolute shit out of this. So that way, if we ever get questioned, I can say, this is where I've come from. I will literally PDF different documentation that I have found either on the IRS website, or there are these circulars called 925s, which is basically how someone puts a question out like, hey, this tax law, this tax concept is very ambiguous. And so they put out these circulars which go into much more explicit detail. I will save them because they get updated pretty regularly. So if a client has a very specific question, this happened a lot around like the PPP loans and stuff like that, just making sure that we understood that as well. So unfortunately, it's not a yes, you absolutely can, or no, you can't. A lot of times you really have to drill down. If you are simply handing your information over to an accountant without any sort of discussion, you are doing yourself a disservice, because there may be things that you are missing. And there may be things that they are taking that could put you in harm's way in terms of an audit if anything were to come up.
That totally makes sense. It leads into a bigger question, which is a little bit vague, but I imagine it happens a lot when you get a new client. You start going through past years of stuff to whatever degree you can see that. There's a lot of head shaking and like, what did you do? How did we get here? So what are sort of like, a couple of big mistakes that you see people making when they first finally find you?
I don't go looking for prior professionals' mistakes unless someone has a concern, because people may have made the way things were 10 years ago. There are certain things that were allowable 10 years ago that were not allowable now. So I want to make sure that I understand what year it was, maybe what was happening at the time. And there are things that were allowable during COVID that aren't allowable now, like meals and entertainment and things like that. So I try not to be like, I would never be like, oh my gosh, your prior account, I don't know what they were doing. But I will ask questions, because I've done that before, and it just makes me look bad, because maybe someone's not giving me the benefit of the doubt or asking the question. And if they have a good relationship with the tax preparer, I will reach out and say, hey, can you just provide some clarity? I want to make sure that I am understanding so I don't shortchange the client, because maybe there's an aspect that they didn't explain to me. My goal isn't to ever like kind of poo-poo anyone else, because I don't know the situation or what they were like. And I don't, especially I don't work with them regularly. But a lot of times I use it as a reconciliation tool. So people, and that's what I explain. I use it as a reconciliation tool because people will forget that they do certain things throughout the year, or have certain expenses, or have certain tax documentation. And if I complete your return and you sign off on it, and then you're like, oh, I had this tax document that actually affects my tax liability, then we have to amend, you have to pay me again, and it can be a big thing. And I don't want that. So I want to make sure I have all the information, and that that we have that all squared away. But a lot of times, here are the main mistakes I find just in business. There's always a joke, and it's, I may have done a lot of stupid things in life, but I've never depreciated land. And the reason that accountants, if they're watching it, will be like, oh, that's so hilarious, is because land is not depreciable. So land sits on its own. It is assessed a value, and it sits there as an asset, but it does not get depreciated, which is not the same as building and things like that. So I see when people will depreciate land as well, or even when they have a city, rental property or city commercial property, they will not apportion some of the cost for land, which is not allowable. So because they didn't realize that they were supposed to, or there are certain amounts of years that you have to depreciate things. You can also accelerate depreciation and use it all at once, called Section 179. You have to meet very specific criteria to do that. And so sometimes people will just throttle it and push it through. And we talk about why a rent-out that wasn't the best thing, or how we make an adjustment and why. I also see a lot of people put a lot of personal things through their business because they were told at some point that that was allowable, or their accountant just didn't question it. But that's why, like this year, like when you bring me, it was like a couple of years in a row, you brought me your P&L, which was just your document, which said your income and expenses. But I said, I need to be able to see everything behind it. So you sent me over the detail. And actually this year gave me access, but that way I could go through everything line item by line item, because it's my job to make sure things are categorized correctly and letting you know. Like you had some personal stuff in there that you didn't realize wasn't allowed, and we've caught it every year because I'm going through the detail, which is super important. I mean, there's also like little things where people will try a lot of car expenses. It's very strict about when a lease is allowable versus when can you put a car under the business, and what's mileage and mileage versus gas and things like that. And so that can be the real hang up. Like I drive all over the city. So for instance, my mileage from my house to my office, which is now very short since I live so close, is not allowable. But my mileage from my office to clients is allowable. So I have an app that I use that I just click on and off, and then I just put a little note of where I went for the day. And there are times when I don't use my car for the day, or when I have parking, I'll pay for it on my business card versus my personal card. If I'm, when I go to work out in the morning, I have to park sometimes and pay for it versus when I'm at a client's and then I have to pay for parking. So things like that are usually the biggest ones, but a lot of it is just disseminating the bad information that goes around on social media about how you are going to get back $27,000 when you haven't paid anything in and you've had no withhold. So like, I'm always trying to understand where this magical money is going to come from. And people will, kind of cite the like earned income tax credit. I was like, that's not even, that's like 3-4 times the max that you could possibly get, and you would need to meet all these criteria. So a lot of it is these like amalgamous claims of I can do all these things for you, and people will blindly follow it, and then they get the letters in the mail like, oh no, you owe this amount of money. So that's a lot of what I see is those few instances, and just trying to understand why the person thought that whatever it was allowable when that's never been the case. Like I've had people come to me and be like, is this a new rule? And I've had to say no. Like for instance, and we talked about this, that's why you're an S corp. We moved you over to be an LLC tax as an S corp because you wanted to take payroll, you wanted to avoid the self-employment tax that you were being hit with for your net profit, and you wanted to take payroll, you wanted to do retirement in a specific way. So people will come to me and they'll be a sole member LLC or an LLC not taxed as a corp, and they'll be taking payroll. And so we have to have a discussion about how that's never been allowed. And then they say, well, the payroll company let me. The payroll company doesn't care. And well, my last accountant didn't say anything. Is this a new rule? Nope. It's been around for as long as I know. There's certain things that haven't changed. So like I said, a lot of it is just disseminating in a way where it doesn't make the person feel bad because they were unaware. And it's also not trash talking the prior professional, because that's not really helpful to the situation. And most of the time, like I said, makes you look bad.
I will say as a client, probably the best thing you can do is just be open and vulnerable and ready to be told that you made a bunch of mistakes, which is why, by the way, you hire an expert in the first place, because you're not 100% sure how to do things. And I don't know how many times I've sat in your office and say, I don't know, just tell me what to do.
But do you remember the whole discussion about your Vespa? And you were so vexed about it. And I actually appreciate that. I mean, I did giggle when I got the message about that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how like in your head were you? And you were like, and I was like, how much are we talking about? And you were like, 200, I think you said $230. And I was like, okay, we need to like back up now. Let's talk about it. But I don't want this to be the thing that you think brings you down. So I do try to be there for clients, try to, taxes, and this is something my grandfather always told me, taxes make people feel super vulnerable because money is a very, very vulnerable. I did not grow up with a lot of money. I grew up money insecure, food insecure, things like that, until I kind of, I was moved around a lot as a kid. And so there were certain things that freaked me out. And my husband had to be like, no, that's not really a big deal. That's just because you're scared and you don't, know, like investing. It freaks me out that my money is in this place and can go up and down. So the one least feminist thing about me is that my husband takes care of that because he knows that's a big point of anxiety for me, because there were times in my life where I haven't had money. So it's kind of like with taxes, the way that society, especially the US, because of our tax system, the tax people are these bogeymen who are going to come to your house at night and like steal you away for doing something very innocuous that you didn't even realize wasn't allowed. And that has never happened. So the first thing people say is, I want to make sure that I'm not going to get arrested. And they'll have like a W-2 and like mortgage interest. And I'm like, can you tell me where your fear is coming from? And they say, I don't know, I'm just scared. And I say, I totally understand that. And so there's this vulnerability. So people wind up telling me very intimate details about their life. And my husband is always, and I have two wonderful staff members, and then I have two admins who come in to kind of do filing and stuff like that. But my two main employees, Nancy and Rosie, who are like ride or die. I'm so lucky to be their employer and to work with them. They always laugh. They're like, that person just told you their life story and some details that I can't believe that they shared with a stranger. You just met them today, right? But that's what kind of comes out about it. So you have to take that really seriously. And you have to I've never laughed at a client for being worried about something or being concerned, because there is a lot of scary language and the way sometimes that the IRS describe things. Like, what you think is fair and accurate and reasonable is not the same as what everyone else. So then we have to kind of go, well, how do we get to that place? How did they come up with that language? Things like that. Making sure that people feel safe and people feel like they have an understanding. And so I turned the computer screen around. You and I have gone through that. We've gone on line by line item. And you said, where does that come from? Can you show me that form? Why does it say Schedule 1 and 2? And why does it say a Schedule C if I don't have it? I'm like, oh, it's actually your Schedule E, and it's the second page, and that's where your pass-through K1 comes from. And we talk about what a K1 is and that it means for something to pass through to you. And so I will explain it till I'm blue in the face, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so, sure, can it be frustrating sometimes? Of course, I'm human. I get frustrated, but I try to always remember that the person in front of me is scared or freaked out, and they just need a little understanding. And I think it helps that I'm a mom, and I've always been very maternal, so I don't mind doing that for people, because I think it's helpful overall.
Absolutely comes across. Even as a client who's never ever been even remotely frustrating, I still find that wonderful. There's a topic I wanted to get to that you and I have talked a lot about, both for me and sort of for fitness and coaches in general. There's been a big push, certainly in the last several years, to have coaches, especially like individual coaches, open their own space. I have been told by almost everyone under the sun, including my wife, that I should definitely open my own gym and studio. Why? Especially when I'm in situations that are imperfect. I'm working for someone that is we're not a great fit, or I'm in a situation that I find a lot of things, a little bit subpar. You're doing well. You're successful. You got all these people. Why don't you open your own space? And I do not want to. It sounds awful. And you're kind of the only person who's supported me in this. So could we talk about coaches opening their own space? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I will preface this by saying, I don't think this applies to everyone, but I just want to let people know what I've seen from an accounting and business perspective in the gym space. I think the reason that people say, Justin, open up your own space, is because I have been coached by you, and I need to be people can't be nice. I need to be run into the ground, because I'll talk my way out of stuff, because you'd be like, Allie, you're talking, come on, you gotta go. Because I don't always want to do what I'm there to do, but I've been coached by you. I know that you're an incredible coach. So it's a big compliment for someone to say, you should just open up your own space. And I work out a lot of times at F45. That works for me because it's 45 minutes. It's you go through. I love the coaches. I'm, it's kind of like a fun cult, but it's definitely cultish. I understand that, kind of like CrossFit. I've talked to them, to the different people, because they don't just coach there. They coach Pilates, they coach, CrossFit and all this stuff. And people have said, well, why don't you just open up your own gym? And there is this kind of pervasive feeling I can do this and I can do it my way. But the way to make money in a gym is it's difficult to have constant people. I know people say, well, what about big gyms? How do they do it? One, a lot of times they have equity backers, people who are using this as a way to harvest losses, or they have a lot of passive membership income where you might be paying $25 a month, but you don't use any of the equipment. So there's no wear and tear from you. You're not using the facilities. So they're just getting income from you, because there's that block of, oh, I can't go on. It is incredibly expensive to build things out now. It is the most expensive it's ever been to do construction and build out spaces so they can work for you, have enough ventilation, have something where your gym's not going to be super hot, things like that. Commercial leases are very expensive. And insurance is expensive, as you know. You're dealing with people who can get hurt, so your insurance premiums just tend to be higher. You're also in a situation where you're having to touch and move other people, and that presents its whole other thing too, where you have to be insured for that. And then just buying equipment. I can't tell you how many times I see people and they'll post on Facebook groups, like I belong to a couple groups, and they'll be like, I'm setting up my own gym, I'm so excited. And then within a year, they're selling that everything that they've put into it for a discount, which makes me so sad because they just couldn't, they didn't have enough runway. You almost need another job in order to do that. So unless you have a gym that you have pretty much already set up that you don't have to spend any money on, that's the only time where I really see it work. And it is harder than ever to be a small business owner. Things are expensive. Ancillary things like beauty, fitness, things that make your life arguably much better, but are not necessary for survival, are the first things to go on people's budget items. And what does that mean? You thought you had 50 clients and you were going to make all the money off them and everything's great. What happens when 25 of them drop? Because it's an election year. And what typically happens in election years, people tend to retract their money from different things because they get freaked out unless things are really secure, and we sure shit aren't. So that's like a big thing. And you just want to make sure that you really have an understanding of every cost and what are you going to do in those situations. And I tell clients when they come to see me about it, I am not poo-pooing you. I'm not saying that you wouldn't be fantastic, but you have to think about all these other ways, not just, I have 50 clients who will come with me now. That does not guarantee clients in the future, and they are not set with you. They can walk away at any time. So you just want to make sure that you understand that. And also, being a business owner is a pain in the ass sometimes. It is exhausting. It's the highest highs and the lowest lows. And I jokingly say sometimes, God, I wish I could just be a cog in a wheel somewhere. And I get that. And so being able to go into someone else's already space, pay them your rent or pay them a piece of your client fees, however it goes, getting to use the equipment, knowing what you can do, and being able to walk away is golden. And it is not because you wouldn't be fantastic if everything would work out right, but it is really hard. And there is more competition than ever because you have private equity and venture capital coming into this space now. So they can throw a lot of money at it. And it doesn't matter if they run it in the ground because they can walk away and go do something else because there's more money. That's not the case for the typical, person.
Yeah, it's so hard and it's so complicated. And I resent the fact that it is so often presented as the next step. Like, oh, you become a coach, you become a good coach, you become a really good coach with a bunch of, really loyal clients, and you obviously open a gym. Part of my pushback has always been something you alluded to. It's like, I don't want to worry about the security system and the bathrooms. Any place I work, I, of course, I'm very diligent. I clean up after myself. If things need fixing, I either speak about it or try and help fix it, all of those things. But I have no idea what the condition of the roof is at any of the gyms I work in right now. I would have to worry about that a lot, even if I was just renting, if I wasn't. And that can take over your life. And suddenly the thing you actually like doing isn't the thing you're doing. You're arguing with roofers and plumbers all day.
A lot of times people who are, and I have clients who successfully own gyms. I do. And they work really hard at it and they've created an incredible client base and they have incredible coaches that work under them that I think they've also said to me that's really what kind of makes this whole thing work. But it can be a domino effect. And I think that it's just important to kind of really think through things because you can get really excited about owning a business without really understanding. And sometimes you'll never understand what it's like until you actually do it. But there are less safety nets in place for people, especially when, like I said, your average person doesn't have an endless amount of funds to put into their business and put into a gym. And when something big breaks, like say you did a very specific type of coaching and it required pieces of machinery, and then what if that machine breaks and in order to run your business, you have to have a new one, but it's a $5,000 piece of equipment, or, someone breaks something. What are you going to do? So, and where's that money going to come from? Because it doesn't always come from insurance, because if you put in too many insurance claims, you get kicked off your insurance. So it's kind of like, what do you do in that case?
100%. I have two, I think, short, small questions that I also got from Instagram that I think we can knock out. But I told these people I would ask their questions and I'm going to try to. Are there, for tracking expenses, several people asked if there's a preferred software, spreadsheet, app, a thing that when I come to you, I'm like, here you go. And you say, oh, good. This is great. And not, What do you do? Why have a shoebox full of paper? What is this?
So my grandfather used to refer to those people who would come with a shoebox full of stuff, like literally in bags. He called them bag jobs. He also had a really inappropriate comment that I think I've told you about before about jobs. And yeah, that's the thing about Bob. Bobby was a funny guy, and so he could get away with it. And I don't mind. I build into my pricing when I quote someone that you could come very prepared, or you can come with a shoebox full of receipts. And we have clients who do that. And Nancy so lovingly, I set out the parameters of what I'm looking for and what we need to do. And she puts everything into a spreadsheet for me, and it's great. But it's built into the pricing. So I don't mind, because I also know that sometimes doing the physical work can be so overwhelming. But I always tell clients, go, what's the best one to use? And I won't plug any accounting system, because they're all kind of part of this like conglomerate evil thing. I am also of the mindset that if you feel comfortable using spreadsheets, downloading your income and expenses onto a spreadsheet and putting specifically what they were for, and then saving the receipt somewhere else, that works for me. I don't mind tallying up and going through, because I need to see the information anyway. You coming to me and saying, I spent $20,000 on supplies, I'm going to say, I need to see what that supply expense is made up of. So I always say that you should find something that works for you that you can stick with. The reason I tell people that they should not just do bookkeeping once a year or their record keeping once a year is because, one, sometimes people have expenses that are recurring that they don't think about but can add up to a lot of money, and every dollar counts. And two, I can't tell you what I did last week, let alone last year, in terms of who I took out for a business, because I take people out for lunches and stuff like that. Or, hey, who did I drop this off to? Or I ordered this thing from Staples. What was it? You know what I mean? Like, because I put all that information in there so I can just make sure. Because I'll order stuff from my home office sometimes, and I want to be able to keep track of that. So I like to just, as long as you're doing it regularly and you are comfortable with it and we can recall the detail, that's all that matters. Because I think that people get so like, I'm going to pay for this service or this thing and it's going to do it. But even when you pay for ancillary bookkeeping services, I still have to vet every single thing, because they will put expenses into categories where I'm like, this is your pay and you're a sole member LLC. So technically that's a member draw, and you were operating under the assumption all year that you had very little net profit. And lo and behold, you have $100,000 net profit. And I have to tell you what your tax bill is for that. So I think it's about it's also good for you to have an understanding. So however works best for you, your accountant should work within those parameters. Now, there are some bigger firms that say you have to use this specific type of software, which, no hate to them, that absolutely can work, because that's how the phone is built. But I think for your like average small business owner, I think it's whatever works for you.
It's on my Monday to-do list. Every single Monday I roll through it, and then it's not overwhelming. It's usually like 20 to 50 line items at most. But if I wait till, even if I wait a month, I'll open it up and be like, I don't have time to go through this. And then if it gets kicked off, and then I'm trying to remember in November what I spent $237 on in January. Like, I wonder what it could have been. The second question, or last question I got on the Instagram, is strategies for small businesses whose income may fluctuate unpredictably during the year. Because a lot of these, especially like membership subscriptions, etc., sometimes people get a big chunk of change in January and may not actually have any income for a couple of months because of the way these things are priced and roll out.
It's important for people to understand what their cash flow is like, especially if it can be variable. And it's hard because it usually takes a couple years to get that rhythm down. Let's talk about baseline. What do you need personally to survive and pay your bills? And what does your business need to survive and pay its bills, so you can continue, especially if you get prepaid for a service, to earn that money over time? Like, how are you going to sustain that? And really thinking through the expenses. Do I need this? Is this serving me, or is it fancy and new and I just want to try it out? Now, if you have enough money where that's okay, you can kind of take that leeway. But a lot of it is, people have to have an understanding of what their cash needs are. And what I mean cash needs is what money do you have? And that includes credit lines, credit cards, things like that. But okay, if I get into a jam, how am I going to pay for that if I've already used all of my money and I'm not set to earn anything for 4 months? And then also in that, once you get through, thinking about, well, what do I have to put aside for taxes too? And so having a good idea of that. So usually what happens is, for me, at least when people come to me with that question, I say, you know that you're not going to earn money for 4 months. You don't think you are. We're going to plan worst case scenario. And what are your expenses over there? Let's go through them. Is there any that you're going to pull? Nope. Great. Okay. So here's your taxable piece of income. I'm going to extrapolate that over the year and get your effective tax rate, including any self-employment taxes, state taxes, and city taxes. And I'm going to tell you the percentage that you need for that. And that way, if you put it away, you just know it's there. Or if you can't, then you know what the bill is going to be. So there's no surprises.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And as always, also relates to something we talk to coaches about all the time, which is deciding on your prices. Like, reverse engineer it. How much money do you need? How much does this thing cost to do? How much can you work? How much do you want to work? And then that will just deliver an average price to you, and you can figure out how you want to do that. But I've seen far too many coaches try and either sell a very premium service that isn't premium or undercut all the competition and do 75 hours a week and realize at the end they still don't have any money and they don't understand how it happened because they didn't take kind of those 3 steps back and or talk to someone who actually knows what they're talking about. I know I said that was the last question, but I'm going to ask you one more because I know I'm going to get this. Can you work with people who don't live in the state of Pennsylvania?
Yes, and I do. I have a lot of clients who are in Pennsylvania. Some have moved. Some found me because, like, there isn't a client type that I don't have. I have everyone from coaches to doctors to veterinarians to therapists to people who are in non-traditional frames of work, I'll say. I have OnlyFans creators. I have people who do different type of content creation. I have a fishing magazine as a client. I have a client where the guy who owns the fishing magazine also has a business where he takes people on premium trips all over the world to go fishing in some of the most gorgeous places. And he walked in one day and was like, you look okay. And you would never think that this gentleman and I would work well together, but he's super funny. And the guys who work there, who are the other owners, like, we work really well together. And one is a photographer and one does something else. And it's just really funny how, like, people will come to me. So a lot of times people just want someone that they can trust. And sometimes, yes, as you said, I do present a little sexier than most accountants. So sometimes people will come to me because they're like, oh, okay, I'm into it. And then when I let them know that, nope, that's not a thing. It's just how I look, and it's who I present. This is actually accounting, which is a lot of times people are like, you're not and I'm like, I'm a real accountant. Like, yeah, but I very much am. And so once they see that I actually know what I'm talking about, they kind of like the limerence of being with someone who dresses a little sexier or presents a little sexier kind of like falls away. And then they're like, oh, okay, I really trust this person. I understand. Like, she's just being authentic and she's going to tell me what's what. They're in Washington State and someone else is in Oregon. I have doctors in Oregon, a lot of clients in California. Right now, I think I have like 4 states I don't have clients in. I don't have clients in North or South Dakota, Nevada, Utah, I think Indiana. But I have clients who live in almost every other state. I have a client who lives in Hawaii. I have a couple clients who live in Alaska, and I present. So a lot of times, if it is out of my realm of understanding, I will never take someone on. But a lot of times with clients, we just have to understand what the tax dates are, because not all the tax dates line up. Some have different requirements. And are there local tax requirements? What is the state going to request besides just the tax forms that I know about? So I'll call the Department of Revenue and just make sure I get my questions answered. So that way I don't leave my clients astray.
And with that, so people can do this, how should people find you? How would people want to reach out? What is the best way to do that? Tell them where to go.
So I do ask on my Instagram not to DM me with requests because I don't want to lose it. Because, like, my friends send me stuff and, like, I kind of do what penguins do. Like, I pebble people with, like, memes. So, like, that's also my personal one. You'll see my family, you'll see my life, and that only accounting. And so sometimes, like, I'm getting inundated because I'd gone on a doom anxiety scroll in the middle of the night and I sent my friends a bunch of stuff and I might miss your DM, or we're not connected and it's in some weird hidden folder. So I always ask people, you can go to gerbertalks.com and you can put in a request through there, or you can just email me at allie@gerbertalks.com. Or if you want to set up an appointment, you can call 215-377-9777 and we will get you on the calendar. But I just ask for people not to reach out via Instagram and TikTok because a lot of stuff gets lost in those, and then I wind up someone being upset because I didn't get back to them. But I do very clearly say, please reach out to me through either email or on the website or give us a call.
Yeah, I can verify that the memes are excellent. but it is not the right place to do an initial professional reach out.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure that I also understand everything, and that way all the information you tell me translates and you have it documented somewhere.
100%. I imagine you're going to hear from a couple of people. We're actually, we're pushing this up into, it's going to release in, I think, mid-November. So if people want to kind of get ahead of January, they can. You're hearing this now for a reason. To all of the people that Allie knocked out, there's a really good reason. There's some time-sensitive stuff happening, so that's what's going on. Allie Gerber, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a joy.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate you. And I promise not to give you any stern talkings to, because you're doing such a great job, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.